You know that question, right? The one everyone asks successful entrepreneurs.
Uh,
So what's the secret?
you know, constantly.
Ash Ali, who was the first marketing director for Just Eat UK, apparently heard it all the time, especially after that massive, like 1.5 billion IPO they had. People just wanted that magic bullet answer.
And the material we're digging into today, it takes a really interesting angle on that. It basically argues that, sure, hard work is crucial. Absolutely, you can't get anywhere without it.
Right, non-negotiable.
But that idea of one secret kind of misses a massive piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
Success, particularly in startups, isn't just about, the killer idea or being the absolute smartest person.
Okay.
It's actually, as one really successful founder put it, massively both hard work and luck. It's kind of blunt, but the sources say life isn't fair and business isn't either. Some folks just get a head start.
A head start. And these sources, they call that an unfair advantage.
Okay, so let's really unpack this. That's our mission for this deep dive, right? To take all this material, you've got articles, research your notes, and explore this whole concept.
Exactly. What are they? How do they actually show up? Sometimes in really surprising ways.
Yeah, look at some examples. And maybe most importantly, help you listening start thinking about what yours might be.
Hmm.
Consider this like a shortcut to getting up to speed on this whole perspective on success, hopefully with some unexpected facts and insights along the way.
And what's really different here, according to this material, is the focus. It's not primarily on the business plan or the product first. It argues everything really begins with you, the founder, the person leading it.
Right. Starts with you.
Hmm.
So we're going to guide you through this, point out the key takeaways, and help you figure out what's most relevant from all this for your journey. So let's start by setting the stage. This idea that it's not just about the grind. Yeah, that massively both quote is pretty striking.
Mm.
And you look at someone like Evan Spiegel from Snapchat, right? The material mentions him acknowledging his own privilege, his luck.
Mm.
It seems like the more successful people are, the more they kind of look back and admit, yeah, okay, factors beyond just my own sweat played a big part.
Which, of course, just completely flies in the face of that pure meritocracy myth we hear so much about.
Totally. This material is very clear. The playing field,
Mhm.
not level, far from it. Some people are born with advantages they didn't earn. Spiegel's background is like a textbook example.
Multi-million-dollar household, fancy private school.
Yeah, powerful lawyer parents. His mom was apparently Harvard Law's youngest female grad. Handled big cases. His dad's connections reportedly helped with Stanford admission.
Oh, wow.
And then came introductions to top VCs, people like Peter Wendell, even tech giants like Eric Schmidt.
Right, and didn't Schmidt comment on his, manners and perspective, things he picked up from his family environment?
Exactly. Attributed the manners to his mother, the perspective from listening to his dad's legal calls since he was young. It's like all these things stacked up, creating this rocket ship success that wasn't purely based on individual effort alone.
And this is where it gets really interesting. I think the material stresses that unfair advantages aren't just about being born rich.
No, absolutely not. That's a key point. They argue you can find them everywhere in anyone's life, and they come in all shapes and sizes.
Sometimes even starting as things that look like disadvantages, right? Things people manage to flip into strength.
Precisely. And to help us get our heads around these different types, the sources lay out a framework.
Ah, the Miles framework. Yeah, that helps organize it.
It does. Super useful. MILES, it's an acronym. M for money,
Okay.
I for intelligence and insight, L for location and luck, E for education and expertise, and S for status, because we can dive into each one.
Let's do it. Starting with M, money. Feels like the most obvious one, doesn't it?
It really is. Economic capital. It's the clearest head start. We already mentioned Evan Spiegel, prime example of that financial cushion and the network access that often comes with it.
And I liked Ash's point in the sources, having seen both sides. He talks about how much easier it is to make more money once you actually have some assets working for you.
Totally different ball game, isn't it? Compared to grinding when you have nothing, assets making money while you sleep.
Yeah. But crucially, the material warns that money isn't like a magic wand. It doesn't guarantee success.
Not at all. They bring up those cautionary tales. Remember, Ship raised, what, $62 million?
Yeah, $149 million, and both just failed. Gone.
$149 million. Wow. Yeah, that really puts it in perspective. You can't just throw money at every problem and expect it to work.
But having some money, that definitely gives you runway. Jan Koum at WhatsApp, he had $400 a day saved from Yahoo. Zuckerberg's parents apparently put in $85K early on.
Right. That cushion lets you take risks. Experiment. Focus on building the thing without worrying about next month's rent quite so intensely.
And it's just easier to jump in, isn't it, if you have that safety net? Or, like Ash and Hassan mentioned from their backgrounds, maybe you can live with your parents rent-free for a bit.
That whole idea of a financial cushion freeing up mental space,
Hmm.
that's why the material touches on universal basic income, UBI.
Ah, yeah. The idea getting attention from Musk, Zuckerberg, Tim Berners-Lee, Andrew Yang.
Exactly. The argument presented is it could be a basic safety net, freeing people from that scarcity mindset, which, interestingly, some research suggests can actually impact cognitive function.
Like lower measured IQ, hinder creativity.
Potentially, yeah. That's the link they draw. And it's also talked about as a way to handle job losses from AI and automation down the line.
Fascinating connection. Scarcity hindering creativity.
Yeah,
And kind of counterintuitively, the material also suggests that having too much money could actually be a disadvantage sometimes.
it can, yeah. Maybe you get complacent, too comfortable. Or you just try to solve everything by writing a check instead of getting scrappy and innovative.
Right, you miss out on learning through those manual methods. What do they call it? Growth scrapping.
Yeah, that hustle you do when you don't have the cash. Finding clever, non-obvious ways to grow.
Okay, makes sense. So, moving on to I in miles, intelligence and insight.
Right. Now, IQ comes up here, obviously, but the material is quick to say it's controversial, hard to pin down exactly.
Mm.
Statistically, yeah, it correlates with conventional success, like doing well in school or earning more on average.
But crucially, they argue the real leverage, especially for entrepreneurs, comes from stuff IQ tests don't measure well, like social intelligence, emotional intelligence.
Creativity, self-awareness.
Yeah.
Business is fundamentally about people, right?
Yeah.
Relationships, teamwork, understanding others.
And they mentioned that psychological finding, just believing you can get smarter, that growth mindset, that actually helps you develop.
Yeah, that mindset itself is maybe an advantage,
Yeah.
using what you've got.
The sources make a nice distinction, too, between book smarts and street smarts.
Mm.
Book smarts being, theory, formal learning, absorbing info. Street smarts being more about people skills, emotional intelligence, common sense, and that crucial BS detector.
Yeah, you need that. Ash's story fits here again, doesn't it? Didn't do well in school, but taught himself coding from books. That's self-directed book smarts, but driven by a practical why.
Definitely. And then you have people like the Collison brothers from Stripe, presented as clear examples of leveraging huge intelligence in book smarts.
Oh, yeah. Programming super young, created their own language, got into MIT, Harvard. Even though they dropped out later, that foundation was incredible. John apparently just loves studying.
So book smarts are important, but you absolutely need those street smarts for the real world of business. Hiring, negotiating, partnerships, just not getting ripped off.
And the good news there, according to the sources, is that those street smarts, they're skills you can actually learn and improve.
Right, like through courses, reading classics like Dale Carnegie, even using personality tests like Myers-Briggs or Big Five, just understand yourself and others better.
Then there's the second part of I, insight. This is that spark, right? Seeing an unmet need or a problem others are missing.
Often comes from personal experience, like Will Shue seeing the gap in London's food delivery compared to New York. That led to Deliveroo.
But you can also actively work towards insight, they argue, by really digging deep into customer problems, asking why.
And it connects to creativity, doesn't it? Connecting dots from different places. Like Rune Sovendal getting ideas by just training himself to spot inconveniences walking around a supermarket.
Love that example. And maybe the most powerful source of insight, scratching your own itch.
Ah, yeah. Solving a problem you personally have. Like Tristan Walker with Walker & Co. He tackled razor burn for black men with coarse hair because he experienced it himself.
It's the opposite of having a cool solution and then desperately hunting for a problem that fits. Start with the real problem.
Okay, great. So that's money, intelligence, and insight. Next up, the L's. Location and luck. Location first.
Location. Hugely important, especially for physical businesses, obviously. Think about why shops cluster together, shopping malls, restaurant strips.
Right, even competitors group together.
Because the benefits, customer traffic, shared infrastructure, maybe often outweigh the competition downside. It creates a destination.
And Silicon Valley. That's the ultimate example of a location unfair advantage, isn't it?
Absolutely. It wasn't an accident. You had Stanford providing talent, people like Frederick Terman actively helping startups like HP get started, serendipity like Shockley moving his semiconductor company there.
It created this whole ecosystem, right? A virtuous cycle. Then the VCs piled in after Apple's IPO showed the massive potential.
And you see similar, smaller clusters elsewhere, like Silicon Roundabout or Silicon Fen in the UK, often centered around universities, talent, and funding. Access to capital, skills, knowledge, that whole ambitious vibe.
That think big culture.
Yeah. And location can be a direct advantage too. James Cakin using a fancy Mayfair address early on for status.
Or Huda Katan, moving strategically. First to LA for makeup school and celebrity access, then to Dubai, where the market was a better fit for her brand.
But interestingly, the material flips this too. Sometimes being in a supposedly bad location, a smaller city, less going on can also be an advantage.
How so?
Lower costs, maybe less intense competition. It might force you to think remote first. Tap into global talent, like Basecamp in Chicago.
Ah, yeah, the bootstrap success story. Intentionally avoiding the Silicon Valley frenzy, building a remote team. Clever.
It shows you can turn perceived negatives into positives. Okay, now luck and timing. This is where Bill Gross's Idea Lab research comes in. It's pretty mind-blowing.
The number one factor.
Yep, timing. Accounting for 42% of the difference between startup success and failure. More important than the team, the execution, even the idea itself.
42%. Wow, so being too early is bad.
Yeah, like VR for a long time, you spend ages educating a market that just isn't ready. Costly.
And being too late is bad, like launching a new search engine now.
It's exactly. Too much competition. The sweet spot is hitting that small but rapidly growing market, like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Netflix did early on. Just right.
Will Shu and Deliveroo again. Great example of timing. He had the idea in 2004.
But waited until 2013. Why? Because smartphone tracking tech was finally good enough. Perfect timing. Plus, launching in a wealthy part of London location advantage again.
So, the million-dollar question, can you actually make yourself luckier?
Well, according to the psychologist Dr. Richard Wiseman, cited in the sources, yeah, kind of, mostly through mindset.
How does that work?
Basically, if you think you're lucky, you tend to notice opportunities more. Like that experiment with Lucky Martin and Unlucky Brenda.
Oh, yeah, the 5-pound note.
Exactly. Martin, expecting good things, saw the money on the pavement. Later, he chatted with a businessman he sat next to, made a connection. Brenda, expecting nothing, walked right past the money, had a totally uneventful morning.
It's about being observant, open, proactive.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Being open to interactions, noticing things, increasing your sort of surface area for luck to strike.
Makes sense. Okay, moving on. Ian Miles. Education and expertise.
Right. And key point here. Education doesn't just mean school or university. It's lifelong learning.
Ash's story again. Uni wasn't for him, dropped out of college. But he learned relentlessly on his own. Taught himself coding from books by doing. Became an expert that way.
Totally. His path was different, but it gave him deep expertise. Now, the stats do show most successful founders are uni grads. Many went to private schools.
So it's clearly an advantage for many.
Definitely suggests it's a big UA. The benefits are clear. Knowledge, the network you build, the signaling effect, that credential, the status from elite schools.
But expertise being really, really good at something specific that can be built outside formal education, right?
Absolutely. Through books, online courses, practice, just doing it. Ash's coding became his core advantage. Larry Page and Sergey Brin's Google Insight stemmed directly from their advanced computer science education and expertise.
And in today's world, maybe that commitment to continuous learning is even more critical than the initial degree. Didn't they mention Apple and Google dropping degree requirements for some roles?
Yeah, that's a significant shift. And
Yeah.
beyond books or courses, mentors are highlighted as incredibly valuable for boosting education and expertise.
Learning directly from people who've done it.
Exactly. Expert practitioners. Asking specific questions. Even finding mentors just a couple of years ahead of you can be super practical. Using your network to learn from others.
Okay, last one. S for status.
Status. This is like your personal brand, how people see you, your social standing, credibility. Influenced by loads of things: appearance, age, gender, background.
Ash facing that issue with his age in early interviews, people questioning his status for wisdom because he looked young.
Right. He had to overcome it by showing his achievements, his expertise. The material also mentions cultural capital.
Knowing the unspoken rules, dress codes, how to talk, like that banking interview study with the brown shoes.
Exactly. It shows how these subtle codes get used for culture fit, often reinforcing existing hierarchies. Different worlds, banking versus Silicon Valley tech, have totally different status symbols.
And then there's social capital, your network.
Who you know, your connections, friends, allies. It opens doors, gives insights, connects you to people. Name dropping is basically trying to borrow someone else's status.
And building that network is about adding value, finding common ground, right? Not just collecting contacts. Depth matters. Warm intros are powerful.
Definitely. And notice how the other Miles pillars feed status. Ash builds status through expertise. James Canyon used location. The Collisons had education status. Money obviously affects status. Think Kylie Jenner, Trump.
Those sometimes really high status people downplay wealth, apparently.
True. Kylie Jenner, though, is a prime example of leveraging existing money and massive status audience from her family and social media. That let Kylie Cosmetics just explode. And maybe her own insecurity about her lips provided the insight.
Interesting thought. So, actionable tips on status. Be aware of yours, highlight relevant stuff, don't brag too much.
Humility can work. If you don't fit the mold, be aware of potential bias, learn the codes if you need to, but remember, your value comes from everything you bring.
And they stress inner status, too. Confidence, self-esteem, that's fundamental for any founder.
Absolutely. You need that belief. And the point isn't to get down because others have advantages. It's about seeing their UAs, but more importantly, seeing yours.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up, bring it all together. The core message from all this material seems pretty clear. Success is this blend, right? Hard work and luck.
Yeah, and the playing field isn't level. But, and this is the crucial bit, everyone has unfair advantages. And even disadvantages can become strengths with the right mindset.
So the Miles framework isn't destiny, it's a tool, a way for you listening to map out your strengths. See where you have tailwinds, where you might need to focus or compensate.
Maybe by partnering with someone who has what you lack. It also touches on motivation briefly.
Yeah.
Like Ash escaping scarcity, Hasan seeking freedom, different drivers.
In contrast, those different startup paths, VC-backed hypergrowth versus bootstrapped lifestyle businesses like Basecamp.
And it pulls out those practical starting steps. Start small, validate fast, even with that crappy but works MVP sometimes.
Yeah, overcome perfectionism.
Focus on product and customer. Do things that don't scale initially. Manage your runway carefully. Growth scrapping before growth hacking.
Building the right team is vital. Complementary skills, trust, and networking. Mentors adding value, being coachable.
And remembering the idea isn't the be-all and end-all. Timing, execution, insight, often more critical. Think Google using web links, Facebook leveraging existing social connections.
Melanie Perkins at Canva is such a great example, tying it all together. Family support, intelligence, lock meeting built high, education expertise from doing the yearbook thing first.
Massive insight from teaching design, seeing the pain point, grit, persistence, overcoming status barriers.
But that core insight seems key. So it all comes back to that question the material keeps asking you, the listener. What about you? What are your unfair advantages when you look at your own life?
Think about Ash's assessment. Self-taught expertise, creativity from scarcity, street smarts, moving location, building status.
Or Hasan, money for a course give expertise, intelligence, location move, luck meeting Ash, building his network.
It's about applying this lens, honestly, to your unique story.
So we've done this deep dive into the unfair advantages material, explored Miles, money, intelligence and insight, location and luck, education and expertise, and status, seen how they all mix with hard work.
And the power here isn't making excuses. It's about seeing the reality of the landscape and then leveraging what you have. Even the stuff that looks like a disadvantage might be a hidden strength.
This framework is really a tool for you to map your path, spot your advantages, the obvious ones and the hidden ones, and decide what to do next based on your unique situation.
So building on that idea from the sources that your mindset can help create luck, help you spot opportunities. Here's a final thought to chew on.
How can you start looking at your own life story right now? The challenges, the background, the privileges, the quirks through this unfair advantages lens. What opportunities might pop out that you've been overlooking?
And maybe more concretely, what's one specific thing you'll do this week to consciously leverage an advantage you've just identified? Or maybe work on developing one you feel you need.
The insights are probably already there in your own experiences. The possibilities might be closer than you think.